Okay, I'm here with Vahid Motazedian. Did I get it right?
You did.
Okay, Vahid's a friend of mine, known him for several years, and he's here today to tell us a little bit about an organization that he founded, Olinga Learning, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. So, Vahid, welcome, and maybe if you could just start off by telling us sort of an overview of what the organization is and what it does.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Travis. Glad to be here. And yeah, the organization is called Olinga. It formally got started in 2010, although our programming didn't really go full time until 2016. So between 2010 and 2016, I was actually working in technology. My background is an engineer, so I was working for Oracle, then I was working for Salesforce. I was partially interested in the work I did for them, but I felt like there was just something more I wanted to do. I felt like I wanted to actually do something that helped the community. So a friend and I in 2010, we would take walks. He worked for PG&E at the time. We would take walks and we talk about how we didn't like our jobs. So we started this nonprofit together. We incorporated it, which is pretty easy in California, but then starting your programming, finding the areas you want to work is a bit more complex. So the area where I really started working full time was called Gonzales, California. It's about like an hour and a half south of San Jose.
Okay.
And so over there, this organization, we started by working with small teams of youth. We call them junior youth. So it's kind of youth that are between the ages of about 11 and 15. And so, we would form these little groups of maybe about 6 or 7 of these youth. We would ask them a question of, what does your community need to be better? What does it need to improve?
Mm-hmm.
They knew obviously their community better than we did. We were visitors. And, they came up with ideas. They wanted to paint murals. They wanted to plant flowers. They wanted to pick up trash. They had all kinds of stuff that they wanted to do. They wanted to like tutor little children. So kind of these volunteer activities over a period of 4 or 5 years just started to increase in scale, in scope, to the point where it caught the attention of the local principal of the local school. He made it, he brought the attention of the superintendent to it. The city manager found out about it. And kind of after that is when it started to become formalized. They're like, hey, if all these great things are happening with youth, why don't we formalize this program? We could give you some funding support for it. So kind of the desire to form an organization, plus the willingness of these youth to actually do stuff, to go out and to transform their community, plus the support of the local leaders is what kind of led to this organization formally becoming an organization that could support the work of full-time and part-time employees.
Okay.
So
So
that's in
initially,
a nutshell how it started.
right. So initially, it wasn't a nonprofit. Officially, it was just an individual effort that you and your friend
Yeah,
started doing. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And it blossomed into something more formal and ongoing.
Yeah, it grew. I mean, the way I view those early years of just volunteering was that's when the seed was planted.
Mm-hmm.
And the seed was, in my view, the intention was pure. Because, I was just a volunteer at the time. I wasn't looking for another job. And the kids,
Mm-hmm.
their intention was pure. They just wanted to do stuff. There was no other intention in it for them. So that little seed took on life because I feel like the intentions were good, and also it was lined up with the needs of the community. So it's kind of like
Right.
swimming with the current in a few different ways.
Wow. Okay. All right. So then what happened from there? So you said the principal and the city manager learned about what you were doing, and it sounds like they wanted to see it grow. So
Yeah.
tell us what was that transition like?
So one thing that helped the transition really was, I told you initially the projects were to paint murals, to plant flowers, to do all these great things that neighborhoods needed to become more beautiful. At what point, one of the groups of kids, they wanted to do more art. And specifically, they wanted to work with clay using a pottery wheel, because one of the books we read, it had a story of a grandfather teaching his granddaughter how to use a pottery wheel. So they wanted to have one for themselves. We didn't have one. We couldn't afford to buy one. So we tried to make one. So we went to the local recycling center. We got an old motor. We got like these gears and pulleys. We got all this stuff, and we're able to, and one of the dads knew how to weld. So he welded up a metal frame. We mounted the motor and all this kind of stuff on it, and we were able to make a pottery wheel. And they took it and showed it again to the school. And I think what really caught the imagination of the school was that, hey, these kids are learning STEM, right? Like they don't really know, but they're learning engineering, they're learning technology, they're learning all this stuff. So especially at that point, they're like, can you do more of these types of projects with the kids? Like we love the arts that you do. In addition to the arts, can you also do the STEM stuff? And that's when they really wanted to make it go from serving, let's say 10 kids to serving 50 kids. And so we said, yeah, absolutely. But how many of these pottery wheels can we make? So again, we looked around the community, like what does the community need? And back in 2015, 2016, that was the tail end of the last big California drought before we got like a couple of good years of rain, right? And so during that drought, water conservation was on the minds of a lot of people. So the kids also asked the question, how can we save water? How can our community save water? And since there's so much agriculture, specifically, we were thinking, how can we help farms save more water? They have to grow all this food. We have to eat, right? But can we help them do it in a way that uses less water, but produces the same amount of vegetables? So then in 2016, we started our first agricultural technology service project you could think of, right? And so especially when that happened, then the school district and the city, even the local farmers, local leaders, they were really very, very supportive of this program. They're like, not only is this helping youth, but it's actually helping local industry, helping local communities. And at that point, that's when we're able to, write more grants, work with some foundations, and really have it evolve to the next step, which was kids not only contributing to the beautification of their neighborhoods, but also helping local industry, helping the environment. And through the course of all of that, getting exposed to work, they were doing useful work for some of the best farms in this country.
Wow.
And so kind of career preparation became an element of what they were doing.
And so the organization became more formal. You formed a nonprofit corporation, right?
Yeah.
That would then apply for grant funding
Yeah.
So is that mostly coming from like government entities that give the grants?
Right now, I would say about 70% of our funding comes from foundations.
Okay.
And another 30% comes from government. It'll be like either schools or cities.
And so the foundations are more like private charities that are giving money to promote certain causes. I see.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And, it's specifically foundations that, let's say, care about youth development. Their goal is to help youth grow and progress and become, contributing citizens. So they will fund programs that help youth.
So at some point you quit your job at Oracle, right? Or Salesforce to do this full time.
Yeah, that was an interesting transition too. Those last few years in industry was kind of surreal, because at that point I had almost completely lost interest in the kind of work I was doing at Oracle or Salesforce at that time, right? And not that that's a bad company. I mean, they do useful stuff for somebody, but I just wasn't interested in it anymore. I'd already been doing that kind of stuff for 15 years. And so I was so interested in this other kind of work that I wasn't at work much. It's kind of the bosses are like, hey, do you really want to be doing this? Is this something? So there was kind of a transition that happened over the course of a couple of years, where I went from doing that to doing this full time.
Okay. And then did the name change to Olinga Learning at some point?
It was originally, when we wrote the articles of incorporation, we called it Olinga Learning.
Okay.
And then at some point, it just became easier to call it Olinga.
Okay.
So sometimes, when we just write the grants or we talk to people about it, we call it Olinga. But we don't, and even when we have the organization, we don't always put the organization in the forefront. Kind of the organization is in the background, enabling the work of the youth. So we'll talk a lot about the program that the youth are involved in. It's called Wings of Knowledge.
Okay.
And so, a lot of people will know Wings of Knowledge, but if you mention Olinga, like not everybody will even know what that is, because just like not a lot of emphasis is put on it. Mostly the emphasis is on the community itself, the youth itself, and they know it through Wings of Knowledge. Yeah.
And is there a significance of the name Olinga?
The name Olinga is actually when I was in my 20s and 30s, and you're kind of at the point where you're like, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be like what
Hmm.
what models do I have to kind of say this is the kind of person I'd like to be when I get older? There's a couple of people that I really looked up to. One of them, his name was Olinga. Another one, Rahmat Mohajir. And they're both Baha'is. I'm a Baha'i too. It's our faith. And I looked at the work that Mr. Olinga did in Africa, in
Hmm.
Uganda, right? And it was just very impressive. He traveled around the world. He dedicated his life to service. And then, him and his family also met a tragic end. I think nobody exactly knows how they died, but their family was just all shot down. I think it
Oh,
was
wow.
during wartime in Uganda, the Civil War. So they met an untimely end. So we named it after him.
I
And
see.
it was like a dedication, but it was also somebody who was important to me that I
Mhm.
looked up to, even though I never met him. I just read about him.
So it's kind of like you're carrying forward some of the work that he started here locally.
Yeah, yeah, dedicating it to somebody who had dedicated his life to service, to
Hmm.
doing something he believed in.
Okay. Wow, that's really touching. Let's see. There was some. Oh, and what does the organization look like today? Like, how many people are involved, and where are you operating? What communities are
Yeah.
you serving?
So specifically, when we started, we just know we wanted to help, right? We wanted to help communities that needed help, right? But California is a very big place. Where do you go exactly, right? I think at some point, also like somebody that means a lot to me was my father. He's no longer with us, but he was also somebody, he dedicated his life to helping farmers, to helping agriculture. When we came to this country from Iran in the 70s, his goal was to get a degree in agriculture, and then he wanted to go back to Iran, and he wanted to help rural farmers. Now, shortly after we left, there was a revolution. It was never possible for us to go back, but he always had that desire in his heart. So we lived in Oregon for many years, and he was always going to the rural towns in Oregon, helping farmers there. When he got opportunities to, he would go places like India, South America, and also help farmers. And so he's somebody who inspired me very much too. So kind of our program at this point is pretty focused in the rural farming areas of Central California.
Hmm.
So, like Monterey County, South Monterey County, a lot of agriculture there. West Fresno County, East Tulare County, South Kern County. Those are all areas where we work with tiny little towns.
Oh, wow.
There'll be towns of 15,000 or less people. One of them has 2,000 people in it. It's not the kind of town where you're going to find a Starbucks or fancy places
Hmm.
to eat, but there's tons of kids. Tons of kids with tons of potential. And
And
if that
so,
potential is developed.
yeah. So in these communities, the young people are helping to conserve water through your program,
They'll
or
do
help
any
the
kinds of
farms
projects that the
of
community
different
needs.
kinds.
They'll
Okay,
do
I see.
projects that help the neighborhoods directly. Again,
Hmm.
any of those things I mentioned before, teaching children, murals, trash pickups,
I
whatever
see.
their community needs.
I see. Okay.
And in addition, there will be industry surrounding
Hmm.
those towns. And also the question is, how do we help them from a young age to start to learn about jobs, to start to learn about technology? Like
Hmm.
11, 12-year-olds are actually very capable. And if you give them some training, they could do a lot of very useful things. So between all these towns, it does look a little bit different. And that's just because the towns themselves are different. The farms are different. The neighborhoods are different. So kind of like it's given that latitude to grow
Hmm.
organically. But what's the same between all of them is that, our desire is to help the community and to help the youth grow. But, the
Okay.
details of it will vary from town to town.
Now I have students oftentimes anywhere from Hollister and Salinas down to King City. So that's sort of Hartnell's area. So if somebody was interested in like becoming involved or maybe doing something in their local community in that area, do you already have something going on, or do you look for volunteers? So tell me, how does that work?
Yeah. Um, when you talk about volunteers, you mean like older volunteers, right? Like college age, high school
Uh,
age, right?
my students are typically, yeah, either finishing up high school or maybe in their early, late teens or early 20s
Yeah.
typically.
Yeah. No. And so we do have internships. We have internships that we do with young people who are either in high school or college. Now, like almost 100% of the interns we work with right now were all in the program themselves when they were in middle school kids,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So kind of like
Okay.
from a very young age, they've been exposed to this.
Hmm.
They felt it on the other side. They know what it's like to be one of those little kids. And now they're
Hmm.
older and they're the ones who are going back and working with the little kids. So right now, all of the interns we work with are of that kind of person,
Okay.
people that have grown through it. But it doesn't mean that we wouldn't work with, additional people. So if there's somebody who just really wanted to be involved, either they like working with kids, or maybe they want to help the environment, or maybe
Mhm.
they're interested in careers in agriculture or technology, we're absolutely open to meeting people. After all, if they live in this community, they're part of the community. So
Right.
who would we be to say, no, you can't help your own community? Yeah, of course, the doors are open. So you could always provide my email to people who wanted to know more.
Okay. Is there a website for Olinga or
Yeah,
for the
there's a
organization?
website, but it's not updated at all. There's really nothing on there. It's just
Okay.
Olinga, Olinga dot
Uh-huh.
NGO,
Oh, really?
non-governmental organization. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You don't see too many .ngo websites around.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Olinga.ngo. Okay. Excellent. And I'm sure I have your email address. So if somebody does want to get in touch with you, I'll share that with them.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else you think we missed? Anything major that I didn't ask about?
No, no, I appreciate the chance to have this conversation with you while I'm sipping my coffee here. So,
All right. Well, thanks again for your time, Vahid. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And
okay.
yeah, good luck with the organization.
Thank you.
It's something quite unique, and I'm glad that my students are able to learn about it.
Thank you, Travis.
All right.